Hi everyone! Today I'll be showing you how to crochet Sassy the Seahorse. With a flick of the tail and a sparkle in the eye, this sassy seahorse navigates birthday fun with a splash of style and a wave of charm. So Sassy can be made in sport, DK, or plush weight yarn by adjusting your hook size. Today I'll be crocheting with worsted weight yarn and a 4mm crochet hook. If you haven't already, be sure to snag the matching greeting card to make an adorable and one-of-a-kind gift that your friends and family will love. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. To get started on Sassy the Seahorse's pattern, we're going to begin with the head, and we're going to be working with this white cream yarn. And the first thing we need to do is form a magic ring. So let's review how to get one of those tied. Okay, so let's review how to tie a magic loop. So to start, we're going to get about 5 inches of our tail of our working yarn. And then we need to form a bit of a finger guns here with our left hand. And then we're going to lay that tail so that the tail part of it is down over the bottom digit of our left hand. And then we're going to take our thumb and pinch that tail so it's on securely to our index and our middle finger. Then we're going to take the working yarn, and that's the yarn that's attached to the ball of yarn. And we're going to wrap it around the back side of those 2 fingers, really close to the top digit. So I'm just wrapping around the back. And then I'm going to continue by pulling it behind my thumb. So I just made a big loop around my fingers. Then we're going to wrap a second time, but this time we're going to go around the lower digit on the back side of our left hand. And then one last time we're going to push that working yarn behind our thumb on our left hand. Then when we've done that, we can take our crochet hook and we're going to flip our left hand over so we can see those 2 loops that we formed. And then taking our crochet hook underneath that top loop, we're going to use the hook to grab that bottom loop and pull it underneath the top loop. Then when we've done that, we're going to flip our hands back over away from our body. And then bring our hook and our left hand together. So you can see my fingers on my right hand are touching the back side of the hand with the loops on it. Then I'm going to take my right index finger and thumb, and I'm going to grab those loops that are on the back side of my hand. So the one on the hook and the one on my hand. Once I've got those pinched rather securely, I'm going to let go with my thumb and then slide all of those loops very carefully off of my hand. Once I've done that, you can see I have my tail. Again, that's not attached to the ball of yarn. And then my working yarn. I'm going to move my tail out of my way, kind of just swing it around clockwise to the 12 o'clock position. And then I'm going to grab my working yarn and begin tensioning it by laying it over my left index finger and then grabbing the remaining yarn with my pinky and my ring finger. Then we need to be able to tension our yarn, so we're going to have to let go with our right hand. But before we do, we need to make sure we're pinching the loop that we've tied and our tail together. So if you look, I like to kind of pinch so that it sandwiches that working yarn. So I'm just going to pinch both that loop and that tail together here. And then when I've done that, I can let go with my right hand, and pulling my index finger up lets me tighten that loop on my hook. Then to lock our magic loop or magic ring in place, we can yarn over and draw through the loop on our hook. And that locks everything in place. You can let go with your left hand. You can even stop tensioning if you want. This loop isn't going to go anywhere now that we've locked it in place. One last thing that I like to do before I get started is I'll take the tail. You can see it's sort of threaded through the loop that we've made. I like to take this tail and pull it out so that I can go ahead and get started placing single crochet inside. Before you begin, we also need to make sure we are working both in the loop and over the tail of the magic ring as well. Alright, so we are ready to make our first single crochet stitch. Alright, so now that we have our magic ring tied, we're ready to go ahead and get started in here on round 1. So if you look at the top left hand corner, You'll see I have the instructions for round 1 and all the other rounds of this project. They're going to kind of track with us. So the first thing we need to do to make our first stitch is, remember, we're working in both the ring and over the tail of the magic ring itself. So our round 1, we need to make 6 single crochet stitches. So to make that first single crochet stitch, we're going to take our hook, we're going to go through that ring and lay the tail of the ring over our hook. Then we're going to take our hook and yarn under, meaning putting the yarn under our hook, and draw that through the ring and underneath the tail, and then up into a nice tall loop. So we have 2 loops on our hook. And then we'll take our hook and we're going to yarn over, meaning putting the yarn over our hook, and draw that through those 2 loops left on our hook. And that forms our first single crochet stitch. We also need to mark this stitch by going through both the front and back loop of the stitch with our stitch marker. So I'm going to take my marker and push it straight through, and then lock it. And we need to make 6 single crochet stitches total in our magic ring for round 1. So we're going to make 5 more in the same way we made that first one. Go through the ring and underneath the tail, yarn under and draw up a nice tall loop, then yarn over and draw through both loops. There's our second stitch. So you can double check you have the correct amount of stitches by counting the loops, these front and back V shapes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we don't count this loop here on our hook as a stitch. Alright, so that wraps up round 1. We can close our first round and do the magic part of our magic ring by taking that tail, and by pulling it, it closes that first round into a circle and sets us up for round 2. So round 2, we need to make 6 INC or increases and 1 in each of the stitches from round 1. So to do our first increase, we're going to take our stitch marker out, and then in that same stitch that it was just in, we're going to take our hook and we're going to go underneath both loops, both sides of that stitch. And then from here we'll make our single crochet stitch just like we did with our magic ring. We'll yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through both of the loops on our hook, and then mark that stitch because it's the first stitch of the round. And then to finish our increase, we're going to put another single crochet stitch in that exact same stitch that our first one is in. So we're going to go through that same stitch again, yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through both. And if you look, you can see we now have 2 of these V shapes coming out of the same hole or stitch from round 1. So let's make another increase in our next stitch. We're going to kind of rotate our work a little bit so we can see that next V shape. And we'll go through, yarn under and draw up a loop, and yarn over and draw through 2. And then repeat by putting a second single crochet stitch in that same place. And we're going to keep adding increases until we have 12 stitches total, that number in parentheses at the end of our instructions, at the end of our round. Alright, so that wraps up the end of round 2 for me. I can go ahead and pull that magic ring tail one final time, and then I'm going to give it a trim so it stays out of my way. You can discard anything you don't use. And we're ready for round 3. So round 3, we've got a new type of instruction to learn. So these parentheses here have some written instructions inside. Let's start by doing what we already know, which is to put 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round, and we're going to mark that stitch as well, and then follow that with an increase in the next stitch. Alright, so now that I've done everything in those parentheses one time, I've made one single crochet stitch and then an increase in the next, I need to repeat everything inside of them in the order they appear a total of 6 times. So I've done it once, so we're going to repeat it again. One single crochet stitch in the next stitch of the round, an increase in the stitch after, and there's my second repetition. I'm going to just keep repeating those instructions until I am all the way around and I've repeated them 6 times, and I'll have 18 stitches when I'm all said and done. Alright, so that wraps up round 3 for me. I'm ready to start round 4. We've got another set of parentheses, but this time we need to make one single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. So here's my first, and my second, and then an increase in the next stitch. And that's 1 repetition. I'm going to repeat that sequence another 5 times for a total of 6 until I'm at the end of my round and I have 24 stitches total. Alright, so that wraps up the end of round 4 for me. I'm ready for round 5, where we're going to start by putting one single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. Then we'll follow that with an increase in the next stitch. And then we've got another set of parentheses that we're going to repeat. We're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of our round. Then follow that with an increase. And that is 1 repetition. We need to do that 4 more times for a total of 5, which will take us to the last 2 stitches of the round. Alright, I just did my last repetition and I've got 2 stitches left in my round. I need to put one single crochet in both. Alright, that wraps up round 5 for me. So for rounds 6 through 11, we're just going to put one single crochet stitch in every stitch of the round for each of those rounds. So I will see you back here whenever I have finished round 11. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 11 of the head here, and before we move on to round 12, I wanted to point out that there is a right and a wrong side of your work. So the right side has these neat, tidy little X shapes for your stitches, and the magic ring that we formed's tail isn't on this side. So as you've been working, there's a chance your work has been working inside out. Dead giveaway is that your magic ring tail is on the outside of your work, and then your stitches have these little lines that run through them. So if you find that your work looks a lot like this is a good time to flip it inside out, or right side out, and then just continue to encourage this side to be on the outside of your work as you continue working around. Alright, so we are ready for round 12. We're going to start by placing one single crochet stitch in the next 9 stitches of the round. Alright, so there's my first 9 stitches. Then we've got another parentheses pattern that we're going to repeat, which is to put one single crochet in the next stitch of the round, and then increase. And that's 1 repetition. We need to do that 5 more times for a total of 6 repetitions. Alright, that's my 6th repetition of that pattern. So to end this round, we're going to put one single crochet stitch in the 9 remaining stitches of the round. Alright, so that is the end of round 12. For rounds 13, 14, and 15, we're going to put one single crochet in each stitch all the way around. So I'll catch you back here whenever I have wrapped up round 15. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 15, and I went ahead and already placed my safety eyes so I could show you how to place your safety eyes. Before we do that, remember, if this is for a small child or for a pet, you may want to embroider these eyes on instead. But if not, go ahead and use some safety eyes. They're going to be placed in the space between rounds 11 and 12. So we just made round 15, so we're going to count up from round 15, 14, 13, 12, 11. And then when we added the one single crochet increase in round 12 on just one side of the head, that's where the eyes are going to be placed. So if you look at the side of your, like the profile of your head so far, you notice one side's a little wider. It kind of flares away from the top part of the head. The eyes are going to be added to that. It's sort of like the face that we've crocheted. And then when you place them between rounds 11 and 12, they need to be 3 stitches apart. So once you've got them positioned where you like, I like to double check that I've got them on the right side of the body by kind of flipping the head side to side. But once you've got them placed, you can go ahead and snap the backs on the inside. And now that they're placed, we're ready to continue crocheting. So I'm going to go ahead and put my hook back in. And we're ready to start in on round 16. So I'm going to take my marker out. We've got a new kind of stitch to learn here, which is the DEC. But let's start with what we know. We're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of our round. And then we need to make a DEC or a decrease. So to do that, we're going to go through our next stitch and yarn under, and do that exact same thing in the stitch right after. Go through and yarn under, and that gives us 3 loops on our hook. And then to finish, we're going to yarn over and draw through all 3 of those loops. So if you look, that takes 2 stitches from our previous round and brings them together into 1 stitch for this round. So we're decreasing the amount of stitches that we have. So that's 1 repetition of those parentheses. Let's do that another 8 times until we are all the way around and have 27 stitches total. Alright, that wraps up round 16 for me, so I'm ready to start in on round 17. We're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of our round. And then decrease. Then we're going to repeat that another 4 times for a total of 5 repetitions, and that'll take us to the last 2 stitches of our round. Alright, I'm at my last 2 stitches. I'm going to put one single crochet in both. Alright, that's round 17 done. We're ready to start in on round 18, where we're going to begin by decreasing in the first stitch. And then we're going to mark that decrease. Then we're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. Then we're going to repeat that sequence 2 more times. So decrease, 4 single crochet, then we're going to make another decrease, and finish off this round by putting one single crochet stitch in the remaining 2 stitches of the round. And then for rounds 19 through 24, we're just going to put one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will see you back here whenever I wrap up the end of round 24. Alright, so I've just wrapped up round 24 and we're ready to fasten off. So to do that, we're going to take our stitch marker out. And in that stitch that it was just in, we need to make a slip stitch. So to do that, we'll take our hook, go through that stitch, yarn under and draw through. And then with the loop that we just made, we're going to keep pulling it through the only other loop on our hook. Alright, so then we are ready to fasten off all the way, and we can cut a short tail with our working yarn, and then pull that last slip stitch all the way through until our tail comes through the slip stitch 2. Then we can tighten down that slip stitch by pulling that tail, and that slip stitch we're going to tie a little bit of a knot here. Alright, so that's the head. We need to get it stuffed, and then we're going to push these rounds that we made inside. So let's grab some stuffing first. Alright, so now that I have the head stuffed, we're going to take rounds 19 through 24, these sort of shorter rounds here at the end, and we're going to stuff them so they go inside of the head too. So I'm going to start by pushing that tail that I cut inside of the head. And then I'm going to just fold those rounds down and push them so that they sort of go inside of the head. Alright, and that wraps up the head. Alright, so next up we're going to be making the nose. So we're going to start again with that white cream colored yarn and forming a magic ring. Alright, I've got my magic ring formed and ready to start in on round 1, where we're going to put 8 single crochet stitches inside of our magic ring. Alright, I've got all 8 of my single crochet stitches. I'm going to pull the tail to my magic ring. And then for round 2, which is the last round of the nose, we're going to be working in the back loop only. So let's start by taking our stitch marker out. And when we slipped our stitch marker through our stitch, we slipped it through both of the loops, the front and the back loop. When we work in the next stitch and all stitches afterwards, we're going to be working in only the back loop. So to do that, we're going to take our hook and go through just this back side of the stitch, the one closest to the magic ring tail. So push our hook through just the back loop. Then we're going to make our single crochet stitch as normal. And of course mark that stitch. And if you look, it leaves the front loop behind, which is what we want. So we're going to continue adding single crochet stitches, 1 in each of the 8 back loops from the stitches from round 1. Alright, that was my last back loop only single crochet, and that's the last stitch that I need to crochet. So let's fasten off by slip stitching. So take our stitch marker out, and then slip stitch in the stitch it was just in through both the front and back loop of it. And then we are ready to cut a tail to sew with. I like to give myself a lot of extra, so I cut usually 6 to 8 inches or so. And then we're going to pull that slip stitch until the tail goes all the way through, and then tighten down. I'm also going to trim my magic ring tail and discard the extra. And then we can go ahead and get the nose attached to the head by threading that tail that we cut through the eye of a yarn needle. And then we're going to attach it so that it goes in between the eyes and then just a little bit lower on the head. So to attach, I'm going to take my yarn needle that I've threaded with the tail from the nose. I'm going to grab some of the fabric of the head, and then grab some of the fabric of the nose. And I'm just going to keep stitching the nose on, sewing back and forth between the stitches of the nose and the stitches of the head, until I've gone all the way around and have completely attached the nose to the head. Alright, I've gone all the way around and have the nose attached. So I'm going to go ahead and tie a knot and then weave this tail in. To do that, I'm going to tie a surface knot, so it's sort of like an embroidery French knot. I'm going to loop the yarn over the surface of the head, and then I'm going to sew into a little of the fabric of the head and up through that loop. Then I'll just keep pulling that tail until it ties a knot around itself. And then to weave this in, I'm going to send the needle down into the fabric of the head close to where that knot is, and then just out through a random place on the head. And as I pull, I can pull that knot inside. Then I can unthread my tapestry needle, and by pulling that white yarn tail and snipping close to the fabric of my work, I weave the tail in. You can discard anything you don't use. And then let's go ahead and get the eyelashes embroidered on here as well. So let's grab a little bit of black embroidery floss. So I went ahead and threaded my embroidery needle with some black embroidery floss, and I'm going to send my needle in and go right above the eye on the right side here. And then I'm going to leave a little tail with that black embroidery floss hanging on the outside of the head. I'm going to come back to that and tie a knot with it. So to sew the first eyelash, I'm going to bring my needle down along the corner of the eye so that it's even with the side of the eye here. And then sew to the stitch directly above. I'm going to add a little wing to the eyelash as well. So there's the first part of the eyelash. And then I'm going to go down through that same place I came up and sew across to the other eye, because I'm going to add both eyelashes with this embroidery floss. So that forms the wing on her eye here. And I'll do the same thing on the other side. So I'll sew down so that it's even with the corner of the eye on this side. And then sew up to make the wing. And I'll go back down through that same stitch. I'm going to go all the way across and come out through the place where that tail is hanging out on this side. You can see that forms the wing on the other side. I pulled a little too tight, so let me loosen that stitch a bit. So there are the eyelashes. Once you've done that, you can unthread your embroidery needle. And then we're going to take these two tails and tie them together like we would our shoelace. So kind of a square knot. And I'm going to do a double knot just to make sure that they're extra secure. Then I'm going to trim them short so they're about the same length. And of course you can discard anything you don't use. So now that we have those cut, we're going to go ahead and push these two tails to the inside of our work. And I find the easiest way to do that is with a crochet hook or with an embroidery needle. You just kind of stuff the tails inside. Once they're all the way in, I sometimes will take a needle and just push them all the way through. Alright, so those are the eyelashes and the nose attached. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and embroider on the eyebrows as well. So I went ahead and threaded my embroidery needle with some more black embroidery floss. And the eyebrows are about 3 stitches above and sort of slant higher towards the inside corner and lower towards the outside. So I'm going to send my embroidery needle in and up through about 3 stitches above the eye, and then even with the inside corner. And just like with the eyelashes, I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail on the outside. And then the other side of the eyebrow is even with the other side of the eye, but 1 stitch down. And I'm going to send it across to do the eyebrows on the other side. So I'll sew the other eyebrow on the other side. And then send my embroidery floss all the way over and out through the same stitch it went in through. So the eyebrows added on, I can go ahead and unthread my tapestry or my embroidery floss needle. I'm going to trim those 2 tails so they're the same length. And then tie them together just like I did with the eyelash. And then I'm going to send them into the inside of the head just like I did with the eyelash. And that wraps up the eyebrows. Alright, so next up we need to make the horns, and one's going to be in this pink color and the other one's going to be in more of a blue color. So I'm going to be using pink to make the first one, and then you'll need to make the second one with the blue in the same way that the pink one is made. So to get started, we need to first review how to tie a slip knot. So let's go ahead and review. Alright, so let's review how to start with a slip knot and chains. So the way I like to tie my slip knots is I'm going to take my yarn and I'm going to take the tail part and about 5 inches or so of that tail part, and I'm going to fold it behind the working yarn. I also like to pinch my fingers inside of that loop, so I'll put my index in middle, or I can wrap my pinky and my really whatever fingers you want to wrap inside. So once you've crossed that behind and then you've made a little bit of a loop, we're going to fold that tail over and wedge it in between some of those fingers we have inside of the loop. Then when we've done that, our goal is to pull this strand through without pulling all of the tail through as well, because that's just going to tie a regular knot. We're going to use this loop we formed to sort of pinch the tail into a loop that we can tighten or loosen as we need. So to do that, I'm going to grab both the working yarn and that tail, and then I'm going to use my fingers to sort of pull that tail end through, and then by tightening both the working yarn and the tail and then pulling that loop, I form a slip knot. Now the reason I like to tie them this way is because they tighten whenever you pull the tail, but they don't tighten whenever you pull the working yarn. So that way whenever you start tensioning, it's not going to pull your loop really tightly closed. And then when we weave this tail in, it secures that first stitch. It also allows us to tighten that stitch too. So if we add a lot of stitches to this slip knot that we've tied, we have the ability to tighten it after the fact. So let's practice that one last time so we can just pull that slip knot out. And again, we're going to take about 5 inches or so of our tail and we're going to wrap it behind our working yarn and bring it and wedge it in between our fingers that are inside that loop we've made. And then by pulling that working yarn and that loop through, can tie our slip knot. Once we've got it tied, then we're ready to go ahead and begin chaining. So we can grab our crochet hook, put it inside of that slip knot we've tied, and then by tugging the tail, we can tighten it down on our hook. Then we're ready to start chaining however many stitches we need to chain for our pattern. So to chain, it's a lot like a slip stitch. We're just going to take our working yarn and yarn over and pull it straight through and up. And the goal when we chain is to make these loops all the same size. So try not to make them too tight, but also try not to pull them up too long or you'll have a really loose chain. Alright, that's how we'll start when we tie a slip knot and chain. Alright, so now that we have our slip knot formed, we're ready to go ahead and begin by chaining 4 stitches. So to chain, we're going to take our hook and we're going to yarn over. So put the yarn over our hook and then draw the yarn through our slip knot. And that forms our first chain. We need to chain 4 stitches. So 2, 3, 4. And remember, the loop on our hook doesn't count as a stitch. Then we're ready to go ahead and continue with round 1. We're going to place a single crochet stitch in the second chain from our hook. So again, remember, don't count the one on our hook. So 1, 2, we're going to go through that chain and then yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through both, and that forms our first single crochet stitch. Then we're going to make another single crochet stitch in our next chain. So we're going to go through, yarn under and draw up a loop, then yarn over and draw through 2. And then in that last stitch, which is our slip knot that we tied, we're going to slip stitch. So we'll go through, yarn under and draw up a loop, and then draw that loop we just made through the last loop on our hook. And then we're going to chain 1 stitch and turn our work. So to turn our work, we're basically just going to flip it around. So for row 2, we're going to start by placing 1 slip stitch in the first back loop of our row. So this here is our chain. Our first back loop is going to be this stitch here. It's the one that looks like it's right next to the chain. So we'll go through that back loop, and then we're going to slip stitch. Then in the next back loop, we're going to put a single crochet stitch. And then in that last stitch here, we're going to put 1 more single crochet stitch. And then chain 1 stitch and turn. And then for row 3, we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the back loop of the first stitch of the row. So single crochet in the back loop. We'll do the same thing in the next back loop, another single crochet stitch. And then a slip stitch in that last back loop. And that wraps up the horn, so we can go ahead and cut a medium length tail because we're going to use this to sew the horn on. And then I'm going to tighten my slip knot, and I'm going to draw both the tail that I just cut and the tail from my slip knot through this last loop on my hook. So pull them both through and then tighten both of them down. So that is one of the horns and the pink one made. Let's make 1 more in blue and then get them attached. Alright, so I have both horns made, the blue and the pink one, and I'm ready to attach them. So I'm going to start by working with the pink horn, and I'm going to grab the shorter tail, the slip knot tail that I made, and get that one threaded through the eye of my yarn needle first. Then I'm going to grab the head, and the horns go on the side of the head and are pretty much even with the eyebrows. So I'm going to go ahead and send my yarn needle in through the side of the head and then straight through to the other side. And I'm going to unthread my needle with that we just used. That weaves that tail in and kind of locks the fin or the horn in place so that we can use this tail to attach. So I'm going to thread that tail through my yarn needle as well. And then I'm going to use this tail to sew the horn on. So I'm going to start by going through the fabric of the head underneath where the horn's attached, starting in the front, going towards the back. I'm going to do that a second time. I'm going to go through the fabric of the horn, come out through the front, and then just go through the same place again, going underneath the horn and out through the back. And that gets the horn attached. I can go ahead and fasten off by tying a surface knot. So again, sort of like a French knot here. I'll loop the yarn over the surface of my work, sew into a little of the fabric of the work, and then up through that loop that I just tied. And by pulling, it'll form a knot. And then I'm going to weave it in by sewing it into the head and out through just any old place. And that sends the knot to the inside. You can unthread your yarn needle, and then we can cut both of those tails and discard what we don't need. And that attaches the first horn. Let's repeat on the other side with the other horn. Alright, so that is both of the horns attached. Alright, next up we're starting in on the body, and we're going to begin with the white cream yarn and by forming a magic ring. Alright, there's my magic ring formed, and I'm ready for round 1, where I'm going to put 5 single crochet stitches inside of this magic ring. Alright, once you've got those first 5 single crochet stitches added, you can pull the tail of the magic ring to close round 1. And we're ready for round 2, where we're going to begin by putting an increase in the first stitch of the round. And then we'll put 1 single crochet stitch in the remaining 4 stitches of the round. So that's round 2 done. For round 3, we'll start the same way we started for round 2, by putting an increase in the first stitch of the round. Then we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the remaining 5 stitches. And that wraps up round 3. Round 4 we'll start by putting 1 increase in the first stitch of the round. And then we'll put 1 single crochet stitch in the remaining 6 stitches of the round. That's round 4 done. Then for round 5, we'll start by increasing in the first stitch of the round. And then put 1 single crochet stitch in the remaining 7 stitches of the round. Alright, that's round 5 done. First, before I move on to round 6, I'm going to take that magic ring tail and stuff it to the inside of my piece to keep it out of my way. Then for round 6, we're ready to go ahead and begin by working 4 single crochet stitches in the back loops only. So the first 4 stitches of the round are going to be worked in the back loop only. So there are my first 4 stitches in the back loop only. And then in the next 5 stitches of the round, we're going to just be working in both the front and back loop. Alright, that's round 6 done. Ready for round 7. We're going to make the next 4 stitches again in the back loop only. So there are the first 4 stitches in the back loop only. Then I'm going to make 1 single crochet stitch in the next stitch of the round. And then an increase in the next 3 stitches. And then 1 single crochet in the last stitch of the round. Alright, so we're ready for round 8. We're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. And then an increase afterwards. Then we're going to repeat that repetition another 5 times for a total of 6 all the way around. Alright, that wraps up round 8. We're ready for round 9, where we're going to make the first 6 single crochet stitches in the back loops only. So there are the first 6 single crochet stitches made in the back loops only, and then the remaining 12 stitches we're going to just place in the front and back loops. Alright, that wraps up round 9. We're ready for round 10. We're going to make the next 6 single crochet stitches in the back loops only. Then we've got a parentheses pattern to repeat where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch and then an increase. And we're going to repeat that 5 more times for a total of 6 all the way around. Alright, that's round 10 done. We're ready for round 11, where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. And then increase in the next stitch. And then repeat that sequence another 5 times for a total of 6 all the way around. Alright, that's round 11 done. I'm ready for round 12. We're going to begin by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first 2 stitches of the round. Then follow that with an increase. And then I've got a parentheses pattern to repeat where I'm going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. Follow that with an increase. And then repeat that 4 more times for a total of 5. Alright, there's my last increase, so I'm going to finish this round by putting one single crochet stitch in the remaining 2 stitches of the round. Alright, so that sets me up for rounds 13 through 16, where I'm going to just put one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will see you back here whenever I finish round 16. Alright, so I just wrapped up the end of round 16 and I'm ready to move on to round 17, where we're going to start by putting one single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. And follow that with a decrease. And then repeat that sequence another 5 times for a total of 6 all the way around. Alright, that wraps up round 17. For round 18, we're going to put one single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. And then a decrease. Then repeat that sequence another 5 times for a total of 6. For round 19, we're going to start by putting one single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches of the round. And then decrease. And just like the last 2 rounds, we'll repeat that sequence 5 more times for a total of 6. Okay, we're ready for round 20, where we're going to start by putting one single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round. And then follow that with a decrease. And then repeat that sequence another 5 times for a total of 6. Alright, so before we start in on rounds 21 through 27, let's go ahead and get the body stuffed up to this point. Alright, so that's the body stuffed. You can see the tail. So then for rounds 21 through 27, we're just going to be putting one single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around. So I will see you back here whenever I am done with round 27. Alright, so I just wrapped up round 27, and before I make round 28, I'm going to add some stuffing to the inside of the neck here. Alright, so now that I have the neck stuffed, I'm ready to start my last round, which is round 28, where I'm going to put one decrease in every stitch all the way around. Alright, so that's my last decrease. I'm ready to fasten off, so I'm going to take my stitch marker out, and I'm going to slip stitch in the stitch it was just in. And then we need to cut a tail to sew with. So I'm going to cut about 12 inches or so. And then pull that last slip stitch till our tail goes all the way through. And then we're going to tighten it down. Then let's go ahead and get the head attached to the body. So we're going to thread this tail through the eye of our yarn needle. So we're going to close up the top of the neck first, and we're going to do that by sewing through the front loops of each of those 6 decreases that we made. So I'm going to take my yarn needle and go up through that front loop. And I'm going to keep working in each front loop, kind of rotating my way around. Once I've sewn through all 6 of those front loops, I'm going to pull tight to cinch this closed. And then we are ready to attach the head to the body. So the neck is going to go inside of the head where we've folded that really long neck that we made. So we're going to just slot the needle into the head and then up through the top of that magic ring that we made when we formed the head. And then we're going to pull that tail, which is going to pull the head into the neck into the inside of the head. So pull that pretty tight to get it attached. And then we're going to send that tail back down through the top of the head. So grab the needle from the inside of the head here. And then we're going to sew through the neck from side to side like this. And then pull tightly to really cinch the head onto the neck. Then when we've done that, we can send the needle back up through and to the top of the head and pull tight to attach. And then if you pulled really tightly, you'll see it sends the top of the head in a little bit, but we're going to put a hat on, so it doesn't really necessarily matter that it's cinched this part in because the hat's going to sit on top of the head. And that also makes it so that you can move the seahorse's head a little bit from side to side, so it's a little bit more posable. But once we've done that, we're going to go ahead and tie a surface knot here on the surface of the head. So grab a little of the fabric of the work itself, and then sew up through that loop that you formed, and then pull to tie a knot. And then we'll weave that tail into the head and out through just any old place. Then you can unthread your yarn needle and trim. And that is the head attached to the body. Alright, so I have both of the fins made, and they're made just like the horns. So I'm going to go ahead and get them attached to the body. And I'm going to start by attaching the pink fin, and it gets attached to the side that the blue horn is attached to. And we're going to attach them the same way that we attached the horns. So I'm going to go ahead and thread that shorter tail, the one from my slip knot, through my tapestry needle here. I'm going to send it into the side of the body and then just straight through to the other side, which tacks it in place. And then I'll thread the longer of the 2 tails through, and then use that tail to actually attach the fin to the side of the body. So I'm just going to sew through the fabric of the body underneath the fin here from front to back, just like I did with the horns on the head. I'll come back up through the fin itself, and then sew one more stitch down into the body. Then I'm going to go ahead and tie a surface knot here. And then weave that tail in by sewing underneath where that knot is, and then just into any spot on the body. Then I can unthread my tapestry needle and cut both of these tails since they are woven in. And that's one fin attached. Let's repeat on the other side with the other fin. Okay, so I have both of the fins attached to the body. Alright, so next up we need to get the mane attached, and the way that we're going to do that is we're going to actually be inserting our crochet hook into the fabric of the head. So we're going to count back from our magic ring, so round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going to take our hook and then just slip it underneath one of the stitches in the center of round 5, centered here on the head. Once you've got your hook slipped through, I'm going to go ahead and take some of this orange colored yarn for the mane, and I'm going to wrap it around my hook and then pull that wrap through to attach onto the body. Then I'm going to take that tail, I'm going to lay it over to the left side and then begin tensioning my working yarn here with my left hand. I'm ready to go ahead and begin working directly down for this first row of the mane. So to work our single crochet stitches, we're going to just be inserting our hook into the fabric of the head itself. So I'm going to push my hook through and grab the very next stitch that's directly below from round 6, and then make my single crochet stitch. And that forms that first single crochet. We're going to keep grabbing stitches from each row. So here's one from row 7. And I'm trying to work so that I am centered on the back of the head here to make the mane. So I'm just going to keep working down until I have 11 stitches. Alright, so there are my 11 single crochet stitches. So to finish off this mane, I'm going to slip stitch in the next space between rounds here. So slip stitch right in through here. And then I'm going to chain 1. Then I'm going to turn to start row 2. And then I'm going to slip stitch in the first stitch of the row. Then I'm going to make single crochets in each of the 11 single crochets that I've already done for row 1. So there's my 11th single crochet stitch. I'm ready to chain 1 and then to turn one last time. And then for row 3, we'll start by slip stitching in the first 3 stitches. So slip, 2, 3. And then we're going to make a picot stitch. We'll chain 3 stitches. And then we're going to slip stitch into the first chain that we made. Then we're going to repeat that another 2 times, so 3 slip stitches. 1, 2, 3. Another picot stitch. Three more slip stitches. One more picot stitch. And then we'll end by slip stitching in the last 3 stitches of the row. Alright, and that wraps up the mane, so we can go ahead and cut a medium length tail and then pull that last slip stitch all the way through and then tighten. And then we can weave in this tail, so we'll thread it through the eye of our tapestry needle. And I'm going to weave my tail in by sewing front to back through the 3 rows of the mane so that my tail is close to the surface of the head. So just 3 back and forth stitches here. Then I'm just going to sew it down into the head and out through a random place. Then I'll weave in the tail from when I fastened on by threading it through the eye of my needle and then just sewing it down into the fabric of the head. Then I can pull both of those tails tight and snip them close to the fabric of the work, which weaves them in and wraps up the mane. Alright, so we're starting in on the hat, and we're going to begin with this light blue color and by forming a magic ring. Then inside of that magic ring we're going to place 6 single crochet stitches. Once you have your first 6 single crochet stitches placed, you can pull the magic ring tail to close the round. And then we're going to actually slip stitch to that very first stitch that we made. So I'm going to take my marker out and slip stitch to that. And then we're going to chain 1 stitch. I'm also going to mark that chain 1. And we're ready for round 2, where we're going to begin by placing 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round, then an increase, then we're going to repeat that sequence another 2 times for a total of 3. Then when we've done that, we're going to slip stitch in that chain 1 that we made, the one that we marked. And then chain 1 and remark that chain. And we're ready for round 3, where we're going to start by putting 1 single crochet stitch in the first stitch of the round, and then decrease, then repeat that sequence 2 more times, then we're going to slip stitch to that chain 1 that we made. And then we need to chain 1, and let's mark that chain 1. Then for round 4, we're actually going to be starting in with the orange colored yarn. So we're going to be working both in the front loops only, and we need to do a color change. So let's start off by taking our hook and putting it through the front loop of the next stitch. And then we're going to grab our orange colored yarn, and then we're going to pull through our front loop that we've already put our hook through with that orange color. And then we can begin tensioning the orange, and we'll yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook to finish off that stitch. Then we're going to tighten our blue yarn down and tighten our orange by pulling that little tail. And then we need to lock this orange tail in place for our next stitch. So I'm going to hold it behind my work here. And in my next front loop only, I need to add an increase. So I'll go through my front loop and lay that orange tail over my hook as well. Then make my first single crochet and then my second to make my increase. Then we're going to repeat that process another 2 times. So in the front loop, 1 single crochet, increase in the next front loop, 1 last time, 1 single crochet, and then increase. And then to finish this round, we'll take our stitch marker out and slip stitch in that chain 1 that we made. And then chain 1, and then mark that chain 1. Then we're ready for round 5, where we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 2 stitches. And then increase. Then repeat that sequence another 2 times. Alright, so to end this round, we're going to slip stitch and then chain 1, but we're going to slip stitch in the blue color that we still have attached. So let's take that stitch marker out and go through where that chain 1 was. And then we're going to pull through with the blue color, but we're going to leave the orange attached because we're going to come back for it. So go ahead and yarn under, pull that blue through the fabric of our work and through the orange. And I'm going to tighten that orange down too, and then chain 1 with the blue, and of course mark it. Then we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in every stitch all the way around, working in blue. Alright, once you've gone all the way around, we'll slip stitch to that chain 1 that we started the row off with. And then chain 1 and mark that chain 1 that we just made as well. Then we're going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 3 stitches of the round. And then 1 increase. Then repeat that sequence another 2 times for a total of 3 repetitions. Alright, and that wraps up round 7, and we need to slip stitch, but we need to switch back to our orange color. So I'm going to take my marker out and then slip stitch to that chain 1 that we had marked, but pull through with the orange this time that we left attached. So go ahead and grab that orange yarn. And we're going to pull our slip stitch through with the orange color and then tighten that blue down by pulling the blue that's still attached. And then chain 1 with the orange and mark. Then for rounds 8 through 9, we're just going to put 1 single crochet stitch in each of the 15 stitches of the round and slip stitch and chain 1. Alright, so that's the end of round 9 for me. So we need to slip stitch and then change to blue, but we're done with the orange. So let's go ahead and take our stitch marker out. And we're going to slip stitch to that chain 1 that we made with the blue. And then pull that orange. And then we're going to cut the orange because we're done with it. And then for the next stitch in this row here, for row 10, we need to lay the orange tail over our work so that we can secure it in place. So let's chain 1, mark that chain. Then for round 10 here, we're going to just put 1 single crochet stitch in each of the 15 stitches all the way around, laying that orange tail over our hook for that very first stitch. And then we can take all of those tails that we have so far and stuff them inside the hat. And they'll hide out on the inside here. So we're going to keep working around, adding 1 single crochet stitch in blue. Alright, so that's the end of round 10. I'm going to slip stitch. And then chain 1. And then mark that chain 1. Then for round 11, I'm going to put 1 single crochet stitch in the next 4 stitches of the round. Follow that with an increase. Then repeat that sequence another 2 times. Alright, so I need to slip stitch, but I need to slip stitch in my new color. So we're going to be switching to this purple color. So let's go ahead and get the purple ready to go. And we're going to slip stitch by going through that chain 1 that we marked, but pulling through with purple instead of blue. So go ahead and grab that purple, wrap it around your hook, pull through both the chain 1 from the last row and through the loop on our hook. And then we are done with the blue, so let's go ahead and cut that blue yarn. And we're going to hold both the blue and the purple tails as we work this next row. We need to put first chain 1 and then mark. And then for round 12, which is the last round of our hat, we need to work the first stitch with those tails over our hook as well. But we're going to be working in the front loop only, and we're going to be putting 3 double crochet stitches in each front loop. So to make our double crochet stitch, we're going to start by yarning over our hook. So wrapping our yarn around our hook, then going through that next front loop, and then laying those tails over our hook. Then we're going to yarn over and draw both over those tails and through the front loop. So you should have 3 loops on your hook. Then yarning over and drawing through 2 of the loops on your hook. Then yarning over and drawing through the last 2 loops on your hook. So that first double crochet is going to lock those tails in place, so we can go ahead and stuff them to the inside of the hat as well. Keep them out of our way. We need to add 2 more double crochet stitches to that front loop. So again, we're going to wrap our yarn around our hook, go through that same front loop, yarn over and draw through the loop, then yarn over and draw through 2, then yarn over and draw through the last 2. Then we'll make 1 more double crochet stitch in that front loop. And there are 3 double crochet stitches in that first front loop. We're going to keep adding 3 double crochet in each of the remaining front loops of this round. Alright, so that was my last double crochet stitch. I'm ready to go ahead and slip stitch to that chain 1 that I made, beginning of the row. And then I'm ready to fasten off, so I'm going to go ahead and reserve myself a long tail. I'll use this purple to attach the hat to the head. And I'm going to pull that last slip stitch through, and then tighten that last slip stitch down. And the 3 double crochets that we added to each of those front loops sort of makes the hat's brim ruffle, which is kind of cute. Then we're going to add some stuffing to the inside of the hat before we attach it to the head. So just take some stuffing and push it into the hat itself. And then we're going to be using this purple and the loops left behind, those back loops that are in blue, to attach the hat to the top of Sassy's head here. So let's go ahead and get the purple tail threaded through our yarn needle. And then first we need to get the tail down to that round with those back loops. So I'm just going to send it into the inside of one of these double crochet stitches, which puts it in the right place. And then I'm going to position the hat onto the head here. And then using that tail, I'm going to snag the first blue loop left behind and then just tack it straight to the head. Careful not to snag any of the fins. And I'll just keep sewing, grabbing that loop left behind on the inside of the hat. And then some of the fabric of the head. And I'll just sew each of those loops down, working my way around the hat. Alright, once you've worked all the way around, we can go ahead and tie a surface knot. I'm going to make sure the surface knot is close to the inside of the hat as I can, because it's purple and I want it to kind of hide. So I'll loop the yarn over the surface of my work and sew up through that loop. And then weave that tail in. Then I can unthread my tapestry needle and cut that tail. And after you trim that tail, the hat is attached. And we can go ahead and add the finishing touches, which is to put a little bit of blush here on Sassy's face. So I'm going to grab some blush really fast. And that wraps up this tutorial for Sassy.